meeting, and for finding the new link and joining us here. We had some last minute logistical changes. Think probably start with just introducing folks from the planning team that are here today. So I'm Taylor Winchell from Denver Water, and Paige.
Yep, Paige Weil from Linker. If you've been coming to these meetings, our faces should be pretty familiar.
Yep. Let's see, Emily.
Hi, Emily Carbone at Northern Water.
Great, and looks like Jeff is on here.
Howdy, Jeff Deems with ASO Inc.
Great, and we also have Ken Curtis from the Loras Water Conservancy District, and Larna Cates, also from Denver Water, who aren't able to make it today. And with that, I'm gonna share my screen here. Let me find how one shares a screen in Google Meets. Is that coming up for folks?
It looks like it's loading, but I don't actually see the presentation yet.
Okay, my screen appears to be freezing. Can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I just can't see the presentation.
Okay. Let's see. Slight issue. My screen is frozen at the moment. Paige, as I'm working to get my screen unfroze, could you maybe share yours? The slides. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Do you see it now? Okay. Looks like you came up.
Yeah, I can see your PowerPoint window.
Okay, great. All right, just holler if there are any more technical issues that come up. But again, welcome everybody today for our monthly update meeting for October. Our agenda today is we're just going to do a little bit of overview of some stuff we've done up to this point. Go over the interview findings. We've done a series of one-on-one interviews following up on the survey that we did, and have gotten some really great insight from those interviews and understand better the value of ASO to different sectors throughout the state. So we'll go over some of those findings, and then we'll discuss kind of our tentative vision for the future of the CASO program, and then discuss our plans for slight typo there, 2022 water plan grant that we'll be putting together to do more flights next year, and then talk about next steps for the project. So just a quick reminder just on our overall tasks that we've been working towards on this project. We really started with basin flight planning, and then delved into a stakeholder values research plan, which started with a survey, and then we conducted this series of one-on-one interviews. And we will still be doing stakeholder focus groups once we have our vision sort of more defined and are working, have more of our final report put together in draft form to get feedback on that. And then kind of all these we've kind of been doing from the beginning, but then also working on developing a sustainable funding plan and figuring out a governance plan for the program moving forward. And our project approach, just as a high level reminder, we've sort of been keeping these 4 legs of the stool in mind as we've been doing this entire project. One is just, keeping in mind the scientific and research viewpoint to ASO. 2, understanding Colorado stakeholder needs from all different water sectors and how those feed into an ASO program. 3, understanding the practical experience and case studies that already exist around the use of ASO data, both in Colorado and California, as well as the use of all other types of snow data and forecasting tools and how these all fit together. And then also the shared learning approach, where we've had our these stakeholder groups every month, sharing our updates on the project, and then also having people from different sectors of the water and snow worlds share their knowledge, which is shown here. These are all the talks that we've had in our monthly meetings, where we started with Jeff Deems giving an overview on everything you want to know about ASO. We had in May an overview of California's ASO program from Dave Rosardo at DWR in California. We also had an overview from Noah Malich on his CU SWE satellite SWE product. We did a panel discussion with some really interesting ASO case studies talking about ASO use in practice, where we had Denver Water, the Bureau of Reclamation in Colorado and California, the CBRFC, Kings River Water Association in California, and also the California DWR. Then we had Dave Gotchis talking about forecasting and data assimilation efforts using ASO. And then we had, again, Jeff Deems talking about Colorado's 2021 ASO outcomes. And I believe all these talks have been posted on the CASO website. And so if you missed any of those and want to go back and watch, you can find them there. And Paige, maybe if you want to paste that link into the chat where folks could find these talks, that would be helpful.
Yep. So I just posted a link to the main website, but under project updates, there's a blog post there, and maybe I'll just post that here as well. So here's a link to the blog post that has those specific topics, the presentations, as well as the PDFs for one of them, because we didn't actually record one of those sessions.
Cool. Thanks. We've also talked a bit about establishing like a pilot program moving forward to better understand like the science of ASO in Colorado and how ASO really works within Colorado's watershed. So we've learned a lot from California and also the ASO pilot flights in Colorado. But with this, we've also identified some gaps, and we know that we need our own long-term data source in Colorado to inform future flight planning moving forward. With this, we're looking at this long-term data collection approach, which would be a dense ASO data set over 3 study basins throughout Colorado, where we would fly 6 to 8 flights per basin for 6 to 10 years, which would really allow us to hone in on what do different flights mean in different times of the year in different geographical locations in Colorado, and how do we integrate those in with current forecasting methods, and is there certain times when flights are more useful or less useful, and what are the different applications in different times of the year. So this kind of 6 to 8 flight approach is something that's already been done in California, and we've learned what we can from them, but we've also learned that our systems out here and our watersheds are a lot different, and we really need to conduct this type of consistent study in Colorado to best understand how to make this the most useful moving forward. In the 3 basins, we'd be looking to do like a pilot basin in the northern, central, and southern region of the state. And the tentative ones at the moment are above Windy Gap, which hasn't yet been flown for ASO, the East and Taylor basins and the Gunnison, where we build on past flights that have been done there, as well as the Animas basin in the Southwest, where we'd also build on past flights. And then we conducted a survey, which most of you on the call, I believe, participated in. And just some high-level takeaways. We went over the results in detail on the last call, but a reminder of the high-level takeaways from that survey is, one, just we have a highly engaged group of stakeholders in this project. We had over 70 responses and a really high percentage of people who wanted to continue to engage moving forward, whether it's interviews, focus groups, or just staying engaged with the stakeholder work group. There is agreement that ASO will add value. 97% of respondents thought that ASO would in some way add value to the state. And only 25% of respondents had used ASO data before. So really high interest in ASO, even though a lot of folks hadn't used it before necessarily in their work. Strong interest in creating and funding a program in the state. People generally agreed that ASO would add confidence to annual operations and planning. Quickly incorporating ASO into forecasting is really important, and that's a theme that popped up a lot in the survey. And then there was a strong interest in having a apolitical, stakeholder-led flight planning group in Colorado that would come each year to some decision consensus on when and where to fly throughout the state. And with that, lead into some new information to share today, which is the interview findings from. At this point, we've conducted 6 interviews with different agencies throughout the state. All of these agencies, indicated in their survey that they'd be interested in doing a one-on-one interview and sharing some more of their perspective, both on the work that they do, how their work fits in with ASO, and the potential value ASO provides to their sector, their organization. So I'll just share some high-level findings from these interviews, and if feel free to ask questions, and if folks from these organizations are on the call and would like to clarify anything or add anything, please jump in if you'd like. So from our call with the NRCS in Colorado, with respect to NRCS forecasting, they really emphasized that the NRCS would need more years of ASO data collection to incorporate ASO into their forecasting, which would mean that we need to commit to multi-year data collection to accept, and to accept that it will take some time to get the full benefit of data collection into their forecasts. And there's also opportunity to incorporate ASO into NRCS's next generation water supply forecasting tool, which is a new forecasting tool they're building that incorporates machine learning. So there's opportunity to collaborate there. In terms of CASO program governance, they said that a state-federal partnership is a way to stay rooted to on-the-ground concerns of local and state user groups, and that the federal side would be a way to get things funded and to be able to supply technical guidance on certain aspects of the project. With regards to new SNOTEL sites, so this was one of the direct values they said ASO could provide the NRCS in the immediate term, because ASO data provides guidance for choosing new SNOTEL site locations. And then also just a little bit of a plug for them. Maybe they did mention that in terms of adding new SNOTEL sites, NRCS can accept funds from cooperators interested in new sites and new sensors. So, for those on the call that might be interested in getting a new site in their basin, that's something that if you want to collaborate with the NRCS, agencies can provide funds to do that. And then if we have ASO data in that region, that really helps with locating the best places to put new SNOTEL sites. And then a final thing they mentioned with regards to soil moisture is that having a broader network of good soil sensors would go a long way and help support other forecasting efforts in addition to new and better snow information. And then move on to our talk with the Army Corps of Engineers. So the value that they really said ASO could provide them is that it would add flexibility and confidence to flood control operations, and that ASO will provide a better baseline to know what the snowpack is when rainfall events do come. And so some examples they provided was during high flow years, the new Chatfield reallocation could be evacuated to avoid flooding if the snowpack and rainfall justified it, and that ASO information could help make that decision with more confidence. And then similarly, ASO could help decide how to allocate releases between 3 Army Corps projects during a flood year, be it Bear Creek, the 3 projects being Bear Creek, Chatfield, and Cherry Creek. So if they're trying to evacuate water from all 3 projects, knowing which subbasins have more or less snow would help to adjust where to make releases relative to each other. And then for forecasting, so their current models ingest SNODAS data for snowpack and then use precip moving forward and temperature to melt the snow. And they said that ASO data could be used as a correction for snowpack inputs to those models. And with regards to uncertainty, they said that ASO, it eliminates one unknown variable, but there's still, a ton of other unknown variables, including how much rainfall actually fell, in particular because of sparse radar coverage. So just something to keep in mind with regards to uncertainty and sort of tampering expectations. In our talk with the CWCB, so the CWCB agreed that they should be involved as a coordinating body for ASO flights in Colorado and had an interest in this as well. In terms of funding, they said if CWCB is one of the primary funders, there is some concern over the reliability of funds from year to year. With program management, so there's a strong interest from current staff, but in planning a program like this, we must keep in mind the potential for staff turnover and shifting projects within the organization, as well as changing administrations. So we need to build some resilience into the program one way or another. For contracting, they said that timing will be really important. And for a project of this scale, they'd want to start contracting at least a half year in advance of the pending year's flights. And then overall, they were also in favor of some sort of state-federal partnership model. We spoke with the Colorado Water Trust to get the environmental perspective. And the way that they put it in terms of ASO's value to the environment is, they said, the environment, and here talking about the environment in terms of rivers and river-dependent ecosystems, benefits when water is managed as efficiently as possible so that more water can be shared or released as in-stream flows, and that ASO contributes to efficient water management. And quote here is that water sharing works best with as much certainty as possible. And that, to follow that ASO contributes some certainty to our understanding of the snowpack and then incoming stream flow. So they talked about irrigation decisions and that some of their water sharing agreements for in-stream flows are based on split season irrigation setups. And those split season irrigation decisions often need to be made by April 1st. And so ASO could add confidence to those decisions as well as flexibility if later season forecasts improve, and they could potentially shift the range of when they make those decisions. They talked about uninstrumented basins and said that flying drainages ignored by instrumentations will provide really crucial information to local scale stakeholders. And then they said that maximizing coverage wherever possible would be beneficial, even if it's rotating coverage and not returning for a few years. So they were really in favor of flying as much of the state as possible, whenever possible. And in terms of ASO data, they really emphasize to keep it accessible, digestible, and consistent, including for those with a more basic understanding of water and sort of the technical data side of water. And then a final quote from them is, if you don't know what water is coming your way, the likelihood of releasing water for the environment is low. Getting at the fact that ASO provides more confidence as to what water is actually coming your way. And then two more here. So we spoke with the CBRFC. And in terms of integrating ASO with their forecasting models, they said it's currently too early to use ASO and RFC models, but given time and established historical relationships between ASO and RFC models, they envision using it more directly in the models. For model calibration, they said that the more flights conducted in the same areas and at the same times each year, the better the data will be for calibrating models. And that gets back at the pilot project I was referring to earlier, where we'd fly 6 to 8 times in specific basins at consistent times each year to really hone in on the science of those flights. They spoke to expectations and sort of moderating expectations, and said that better snowpack information will likely add confidence to their models. But that said, it's important to manage expectations of what new data sources can add to a forecast. Even if the snow is understood perfectly, they're still not going to get perfect model accuracy because of many other uncertainties within the models. And then finally, some comments on flight considerations. They said that RFC models don't need as detailed of a LiDAR snowpack product as other stakeholders might. And so they just kind of posed the question, like, are there ways to do flights to cover more area and or fly more frequently, like maybe wider flight lines and interpolate between them, fly at different elevations, or add instrumentation to commercial aircraft. And then our final one-on-one interview that we conducted was with Colorado DWR, specifically in the Rio Grande Basin. And so, yeah, one, they just kind of explained the decisions they make and why they make them. So in reference to the downstream obligations in that basin, so under the Rio Grande Compact, Colorado's releases to downstream states are based on spring and summer forecasts for the rest of the year. And the importance of the forecasts are that good streamflow forecasting makes a big difference in how much water Colorado water users can use each year. And so, which is primarily irrigators in this basin. And so irrigators plan for the year based on forecasting before April 1st. But if there are late season adjustments are made to curtailments in the basin because things changed from that April 1st forecast, or the April 1st forecast wasn't very accurate, then this can greatly impact irrigators, and they can, have their water allotments changed, which they had already planned earlier in the season for a certain allotment. And if it's changed later in the season, this can impact them financially. And their forecasting process is that the final DWR forecast combines information from 3 different forecasts, which is WRF Hydro, NRCS forecasts, and National Weather Service forecasts, as well as just local on-the-ground knowledge. And so the value that ASO can provide in this situation is its integration with WRF Hydro for forecasting, which is already done when ASO is there, and then also as a qualitative check on the system. And they said that it would be helpful to have ASO integrated into other forecasting methods to be able to compare with WRF Hydro, and also to have more years of ASO data for comparison. And then finally, speaking about program governance, they supported establishing a statewide program with a federal-state partnership. They said it's not cost effective to do one area at a time, and it makes more sense to fly multiple basins each year and have planes in Colorado, sort of speaking to a statewide program. And they said it's a good idea to have an overall governing body for the statewide program, and suggested that the CWCB would make sense for that. And so that was our last interview that we've done up to this point. We're still open to doing more. So if you'd like to share your perspective, or your organization or your sector's perspective as well, based on what you've seen here, please reach out to myself or Larna or Paige, and we'll get in contact with you. And it takes about 45 minutes to an hour. And we'd love to hear from you if you're still interested. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Paige to talk about some of the visioning that we've done. Or I guess I'll just stop and ask first if there are any questions with all that. A lot of info.
Yeah. If you do have any questions or if anything stood out to you, throw it in the chat and we'll address it as it comes up. Taylor, if you're good with it, it'll just keep on your slides and I'll just tell you to go ahead.
Sounds good.
So while we're thinking about the overall planning process for CASO and just this program as it evolves in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, we've tried to isolate sort of our vision for each of the different aspects of the program, which kind of fall into these 4 categories. And I'll read them, but I want to talk about these a little bit, and then I'll talk about sort of how our project roadmap falls in line with these sort of components of the vision. So for funding, there's been quite a bit of effort from local partners to pull together funding to do ASO flights on their own. And we think that while local partners should demonstrate their interest and engagement through matching funding, widespread ASO flights have multi-stakeholder benefit, as Taylor just showed through all these direct interviews, and should be funded on a regional level. So that's a fairly generic way of saying we would like there to be state and federal money contributing to this program on a regular basis. And the overall, our overall goal is to work towards, our project roadmap is to work towards that as an overall goal. On the governance side, to be both effective and equitable, CASO should be managed by the CWCB with some sort of federal partnership, and local stakeholders themselves should decide on flight timing and location. So it'd be really easy to throw a bunch of federal money at a program like this and then do a bunch of flights without a lot of local input. And from everything we've seen, the local input is critical to getting you guys the results that you would need to make better water management decisions. So some sort of statewide or state and federal managed program to actually get stakeholder feedback every year to decide on flights, and then the actual decisions would be made by local stakeholders. The third vision component is hydroclimate science. So this seems like a no-brainer, but a fully developed ASO program will have accurate snowpack measurements and improved water supply forecasts across the high elevation snow-covered areas of Colorado. I see a couple of people just joined. Just a quick reminder, we had to switch meeting invites at the last minute, but this is being recorded and a link will be sent out afterwards so you can look back at what you missed. But in any case, on the hydroclimate science, we intend to expand this to all the high elevation snow covered areas of Colorado, both in terms of measurement and in terms of the improvement of stream flow forecasts based on these improved measurements. And then the fourth piece is improved water management and decision support, because all of the useful information in the world isn't, or all the accurate measurements in the world aren't really useful until we can help groups like yours improve your decision making in sort of a measurable way. And so we say, through the delivery of improved measurements and water supply forecasts, local and regional water managers will be empowered to make better annual and decadal decisions. And these improvements will be measurable. So that can be a financial or a water savings measurement. But these are generally the four components of our overall vision for the final plan and how we intend to work, how we intend to push this program forward in the years to come. So can you go to the next slide? And these fall under, in a fairly crude way, this is kind of a roadmap for the next four kind of time horizons for this project. So we have, and we'll talk about it in a minute, 2022 is really a case study building year. So we have some locally matched funds. We're going to be completing this planning project, understanding some data gaps and developing case studies to demonstrate specific economic and sort of forecast value. And so that's what we're doing right now. 2023 and 2024 is really, we see as a growth period of gathering a more pooled funding approach. Having a formal process led by the CWCB to actually collect feedback and decide on flight locations. Ideally, we'd have at least two flights a year in key headwater basins at the timing that has been identified as critical. So April 1st is a big one. And the value of winter and spring flights is well understood from a water management perspective and the sort of additional information that ASO gives you. Over the next 5 years, we see this growing into a more sustainable program So that includes significant federal funding, involvement from the rest of the Colorado River Basin, more flights and more high elevation basins, and more forecast improvements. And then at program build out, we hope that this will be a federally funded, well-managed, advanced hydroclimate decision-making integrated program. So basically, within 5 years, we hope to be at sort of full program build out and have achieved all the visions that we laid out in the previous slide. So it's ambitious, but I will say, so we can go to the next slide and you can see sort of what we're doing this year. So in the first year that we've done all this, thanks largely to all of the involvement of the people on this call who've done one-on-one interviews, who filled out the survey, who've come to these meetings and sort of talked to their counterparts back to their agencies. We are putting together a water plan grant with a significant match from local agencies to do a significant number of flights across Colorado this year. So these flight boundaries aren't exactly correct. These are there's quite a bit more back and forth on exactly where the flight bounds will be, how many basins are covered. So if you see a key basin of yours that's not shown on here, or it's not quite covered correctly, don't freak out. This is a work in progress. But generally, the yellow flights, or sorry, the tan flights are ones that are funded. That funding is known and is already allocated. The purple, there's one more of these funded flights that's pending a specific grant application. And then the green are tentative flights that are proposed as part of our water plan grant. So we're using about $650,000 in committed matching funds, which accounts for about 8 flights. And that's coming from Denver Water, Northern Water, USGS, and US Department of Energy. And again, a big thank you to those 4 agencies for, not only do you get value out of the expanded ASO measurements, but you're able to spearhead this whole program and make something like this possible, because we're making a request for about $1.6 million in matching funds, which will provide 12 more flights and significant groundwork that's required to do those flights again in the future. So for those of you who can do a quick mental math, $650K for 8 flights is quite a bit cheaper than $1.6 million for 12. And part of the reason for that is many basins have to be flown for the first time with no with essentially under a snow-free condition, and that data has to be high enough quality that ASO Inc. can use it for their sort of differencing measurement in the winter. So while there are LiDAR flights in a lot of the state, those aren't necessarily high enough quality. So there's quite a bit of work to do to actually acquire the snow-free data necessary to fly all these green basins here. But this sets us up for sort of economies of scale and cheaper flights in the future. And to me, this map is it's an incredible bit of progress, and we're getting really, really close to having a widespread product across the state. So that's the current plan around. We're submitting this water plan grant. We don't know if the CWCB will approve some or all of the funding, but we have demonstrated a significant match, and we have, thanks to all of your stakeholder feedback, we have very strong support and can demonstrate the value of this as a Colorado, sort of a cornerstone of Colorado water management. And yeah, we'll see how the CWCB treats this. And so
Thanks,
Taylor,
Pete.
yeah, it's to you.
Cool, thanks for that. So we're gonna move to do a Menti poll, as usual, to get first to see where people are calling in from, and then to get some feedback as well. Before we do that, though, does anyone have any questions on what Paige just presented? Okay. Let me pull up Menti poll here. Where's the chat? Figuring out Google Meet still. So I just put the Menti poll in the chat if folks can pull that up. The other thing I'll say about the water plan grant efforts is it'll be an opportunity to test this local, state, federal partnership that we've been discussing a lot. Not that it's would be a formal partnership, but there'd be, in one way or another, local, state, and federal agencies involved.
So, Taylor, can you share your screen so we can see those results live?
Pulling that up here. Okay, so everyone should be able to see that. So yeah, if you can pull up that mention poll in the chat and fill in your answers here.
And Taylor, for perspective, we have 27 people currently in the chat.
Great, thanks. Give it a few more seconds here and get your answer in if you haven't yet. Great. Thanks, everyone. Looks like we have a split as usual. A couple fewer sectors represented than normal, but that's all right. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question here. Oh, looks like people already answered this.
Yeah, I think this one showed up for me first. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right, we've got a somewhere in California on here. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Pretty wide split of basins again as well. Okay, moving on to the next question. So based on what Paige presented of the water plan grant, proposed 2022 water plan grant, if that came through, do you expect your organization will benefit from the proposed 2022 flights?
That's good. People are being honest. There's a healthy amount of not sures in there.
Yeah. Give this a couple more seconds here to get your answers in if you haven't yet, but looks like we've got most answers in. Great. Thanks, everyone. Move on to we have 2 more questions, maybe 3 more. So we wanted to gauge whether, do you feel that your feedback and opinions have been captured during this CASO planning process, this whole project from start to now?
I'm glad there's a lot more yeses than nos. If you do have, I think Taylor, Lorna, and I have all been pretty clear, but if you do have any feedback that you don't feel we've captured through any of these meetings, or there's things that are obvious that we've missed, feel free to reach out directly to us. You don't have to do it in this environment, but we're open to it. We want to make a program that's as sort of equitable and well, everybody's as well represented as possible. So please reach out if you have specific things that you've been burning to say and you never had a chance to say it.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. I'll just emphasize that. Reach out. We are open to all feedback in this process. So if we haven't captured something, we'd love to meet directly with you. And then our final question here. So I believe this, should be a user input answer. We're just looking for any open-ended feedback on the proposed 2022 flights from the water plan grant, as well as the CASO vision. So whatever that might be, if you have any things you support or don't, or and other ideas for basins to potentially fly, this is really anything that comes to mind here based on what Paige presented today.
And we're not expecting a book, so if you just have short sentences, fine.
Yeah. Give this one a minute or so, as you might be thinking through some feedback. But if you don't have more flights, yeah. If you want to contact us with the money, we're ready. Give this about 30 more seconds here if anyone wants to add any final thoughts, but thanks to those that have added already. And then after this, we'll just have one more wrap-up slide, and then it'll be a pretty quick meeting today.
One comment here, may want to look at basins that have already been flown in the past to maximize benefit. There's at least several of the flights that are being proposed this year are actually repeat basins, specifically for that reason. The Dillon Reservoir the Dillon Reservoir inflows, the East and Taylor rivers, and I believe some of the flights in the southwest part of the state have already been flown before, and so we're trying to do repeats there to kind of continue the momentum, and the users downstream of those locations are starting to become more and more familiar with the value of ASO in their forecast.
All right, thanks everyone. I'm gonna unshare my screen, but I'll leave the poll open, so if you're still typing out an answer, we'll still see that if you put that in. And I'm just gonna reshare my PowerPoint for our final wrap-up slide today, and then we'll close out. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah.
So next steps moving forward from here. So we're actively putting together this water plan grant, which is due December 1st. And with that, we're going to be launching a campaign with you all, really, and some of our roundtable basin partners to get as many letters of support for this as possible. From as diverse of a stakeholder group as possible. We really think that'll add a lot of value to the application. So we'll be sending out probably early next week, both a draft to you all in the whole stakeholder work group, both a draft letter of support, as well as just a briefing on a 2-page briefing on the project and why we're applying for a water plan grant and things like that. So if others in your organization want a little more info on what we're doing before just providing a letter of support, you can pass this along as well, or just for yourself. So yeah, we'd really appreciate, we'll be reaching out next week or so, and we'd really appreciate as many letters of support for this as possible, and think that'll, as I said, really help build momentum for our application. So look for that next week. And then, yeah, so we'll be working on a detailed draft plan for ASO in Colorado in the next month or two, and then we'll vet that plan with the stakeholder group, and then people that indicated in the survey that they'd want to participate in focus groups will reach back out to you to vet that plan, and then we'll move into our implementation steps, and hopefully this water plan grant will come through and we'll be able to expand our flight coverage next year and start working to build a statewide program and coordination group. So it's kind of the next steps moving forward from here. And that's all we have for today. So happy to take any questions if people have it to close out. But again, just thanks for showing up as usual, and be on the lookout for that request for a letter of support. So yeah, thanks all.
Thanks.
Yeah, again, check our website for updates. We're going to try and keep that updated as we have more things to report, and we'll put this presentation up there once it's recorded.
Thanks, guys, for running this today. Thanks, everyone, for participating.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paige and Taylor. Good job.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Glad you could make it. Cool.
All right. Let me stop recording.